When they called my baby adopted at the christening, something in me shattered into 1,000 tiny pieces. But what my husband said next, what he said without raising his voice or even changing his expression, left the entire church stunned, including me. That moment is tattooed on my soul, a quiet explosion of truth that changed everything about our family forever. Before we jump in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. We were standing in St. Margaret's Church, surrounded by polished wooden pews and stained glass that scattered colored light across the marble baptismal font. The church smelled of incense and lilies, and the soft murmur of conversation filled the space as family members and friends gathered for what should have been one of the happiest days of our lives. My baby daughter, Lily, was dressed in a christening gown that had been in my husband James's family for generations. Delicate ivory lace with tiny pearl buttons down the back, carefully preserved for this exact moment. I should have trusted my instincts. I should have known better than to expect this day to be about celebrating our child, rather than navigating the undercurrents of judgment that had been flowing since the day we announced we were expecting. My name is Emma. I'm 34, a physical therapist who had to fight through fertility issues for years, and by marriage, connected to the Wellington family, old money, old traditions, and apparently, old prejudices. James is nothing like his family. He's warm, unpretentious, and has always seen the world with refreshing clarity. He's the reason I ever believed we could bridge the gap between my middle-class background and his family's centuries of privilege. When we met at a charity function 5 years ago, he spent the entire evening talking to me about my work with pediatric patients rather than networking with the influential people his mother had pointed out. That night, he told me his family might be a bit much sometimes, but assured me they'd love me once they got to know me. I wanted to believe him. The problem started when I got pregnant. We'd been trying for almost 3 years, enduring the emotional roller coaster of fertility treatments, disappointments, and one devastating miscarriage. When we finally saw those 2 pink lines, the joy was almost overwhelming. James cried when I told him, holding me like I was the most precious thing in the world. "We're going to be a family," he whispered, his voice breaking with emotion. That night, I let myself believe that everything was finally falling into place. We called his parents immediately, excited to share the news. His mother, Victoria, answered with her usual crisp Wellington residence. When James told her we were expecting, there was a pause before she said, "Well, that's a surprise." I had almost given up hope. Not congratulations, not excitement, just relief that her son would continue the family line after all. During my pregnancy, Victoria's comments became increasingly pointed. She'd remind me about the importance of the Wellington bloodline at every opportunity, how James was the last male heir, how this baby would carry forward a legacy dating back to colonial times. She gave me books about the family history, featuring portraits of stone-faced ancestors who all shared the distinctive Wellington nose and auburn hair. "The Wellington genes are impressively strong," she'd say, studying my features as if calculating the odds of them appearing in her grandchild. When Lily was born with a full head of dark hair and olive skin that matched my Mediterranean heritage, I caught the look that passed between Victoria and James's sister, Catherine. It was quick, but unmistakable. Disappointment. James was too, overcome with joy at our daughter's arrival to notice, but I saw it, felt it like a physical blow even through the haze of post-delivery exhaustion. "She doesn't look like a Wellington," Catherine said later, when she thought I was sleeping. She was speaking to Victoria in the hospital room, their voices low but clear in the quiet space. "Give it time," Victoria replied. "Sometimes babies change dramatically in the first few months." I kept my eyes closed, my heart racing with a new kind of fear. I'd worried about so many things during my pregnancy: complications, birth defects, my own readiness for motherhood. But never this. never that my child might be rejected for looking too much like me. The first 3 months with Lily were a blur of sleepless nights, feeding schedules, and the profound joy of watching our daughter discover the world. James was an incredible father, completely hands-on from the beginning. He'd walk the floor with her at 3 a.m. so I could sleep, singing old Beatles songs in his off-key voice until she settled. He took paternity leave without a second thought, ignoring his father's comments about women's work. In those early weeks, our little family felt like a fortress, solid, secure, impenetrable. Then came the discussions about the christening. In the Wellington family, christenings were major events, social occasions as much as religious ones. Victoria insisted on handling the arrangements, and in my sleep-deprived state, I was grateful for the help. She booked St. Margaret's, the family's church for generations, ordered custom invitations with the family crest, and arranged for a reception at their estate afterward. Everything was planned with precision, every detail considered. Except, I realized too late, my input. The guest list was dominated by Wellington family connections, distant relatives I'd never met, business associates of James's father, alumni from James's prep school. My parents, my brother and his wife, and my 2 closest friends seemed like an afterthought, clustered at the end of the list like an obligatory footnote. "Don't you think we should include more people from my side?" I asked James one night, as we reviewed the final arrangements. He looked uncomfortable. "Mom says the church can only hold so many people, and there are certain family connections that have to be maintained." He took my hand. "I know it's not ideal, but it's just one day. Let's get through it, and then we can celebrate however we want with your family." I agreed, telling myself it wasn't worth the conflict. It was just a ceremony after all. What mattered was our daughter, our love for her. The rest was just formality. The morning of the christening, I dressed Lily in the family gown, marveling at how beautiful she looked. Her dark curls had grown more pronounced in the past months, and her eyes had settled into a deep, rich brown. She was alert and curious, taking in the world with a gaze that seemed older than her 5 months. As I buttoned the tiny pearls at the back of her gown, I felt a surge of fierce protectiveness. No matter what happened today, no matter what anyone thought or said, this was my daughter, our daughter, perfect exactly as she was. James came in as I was finishing, wrapping his arms around both of us. "My girls," he said, kissing the top of my head. "Ready for the big day?" "As ready as we'll ever be," I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. We arrived at the church to find it already filling with guests. Victoria had arranged for a professional photographer who immediately began directing us into poses near the font. I saw my parents enter, looking slightly overwhelmed by the grandeur of the occasion. My mother had bought a new dress for the event, pale blue with matching shoes, and I could tell she'd had her hair done specially. They seemed out of place among the Wellingtons and their friends, but they made their way toward us with determined smiles. "There's our beautiful granddaughter," my mother said, reaching for Lily. Victoria intercepted smoothly, taking my mother's arm and steering her toward assigned seating. "The family needs to prepare for the ceremony," she said pleasantly but firmly. "You'll have plenty of time with the baby at the reception." The hurt in my mother's eyes was brief but unmistakable. I started to object, but James squeezed my hand in warning. "Let's just get through this," he whispered. "We can fix it later." The ceremony began with the pastor welcoming everyone and speaking about the significance of baptism. Lily was surprisingly calm throughout, looking around with wide, curious eyes as she was passed from James to me and finally to the pastor. When the water touched her forehead, she didn't cry as we'd feared, just blinked in surprise. There was a collective murmur of approval at her composure. "She's a Wellington after all," I heard someone whisper. "Good breeding shows." After the formal ceremony, there was a receiving line near the church entrance. James and I stood with Lily, accepting congratulations and introducing her to a stream of people whose names I struggled to remember. My feet ached in the heels Victoria had insisted would be appropriate, and Lily was becoming fussy, overdue for her nap. That's when it happened. Catherine approached with an older woman I recognized as Great-Aunt Beatrice, a formidable family, matriarch who rarely left her estate in the Berkshires. She was in her 80s, thin as a rail with sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. She peered at Lily through gold-rimmed spectacles, her mouth pursed in evaluation. "So this is the newest Wellington?" she said, her voice carrying in the church foyer. She studied Lily for a long moment, then turned to Catherine. "She certainly doesn't favor our side, does she? With that coloring, are we certain she's not adopted?" The words landed like a stone dropping into still water, ripples of shock spreading outward. Several conversations nearby faltered. Victoria, standing a few feet away, gave a tight, uncomfortable laugh. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Catherine looked mortified but didn't contradict her aunt. I felt my face burning, a mixture of shame and rage rising in my throat. Lily sensed my tension and began to whimper. James, who had been speaking to the pastor, turned at the sound. He must have caught the tail end of the comment because his expression changed instantly, hardening in a way I'd never seen before. He crossed to us in 3 strides, taking Lily from my arms with gentle hands. Then, cradling our daughter close to his chest, he looked directly at Great-Aunt Beatrice and said, clearly enough for everyone nearby to hear, "She has her mother's beautiful eyes, her mother's perfect skin, and every ounce of my heart. She is ours in every way that matters, and the only concern I have is whether our family deserves her." The silence that followed was absolute. Great-Aunt Beatrice's mouth opened and closed without sound. Victoria took a half-step forward, then stopped, uncertain. Catherine stared at the floor, her cheeks flaming. In that frozen moment, James turned to me, his eyes soft with love and regret. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I should have said something long before now." Then, louder, to everyone and no one in particular, "I think our daughter needs her nap. We'll see you all at the reception, if we decide to attend." He placed his hand at the small of my back, and together we walked out of the church into the bright spring sunshine. I was trembling, though whether from anger or relief I couldn't tell. We reached our car before I found my voice. "James, your family will either accept all of us, or they won't see any of us," he finished, securing Lily in her car seat. "I've let this go on too long, Em. I kept thinking they'd come around, that they'd see how amazing you are, how perfect our daughter is. But I was wrong to put that burden on you both." He brushed his thumb across my cheek, wiping away tears I hadn't realized were falling. "You and Lily are my family, my real family. The rest is just background noise." As we drove away from the church, I looked back to see Victoria standing on the steps, watching us go. Her expression was unreadable from that distance. Part of me wanted to feel satisfaction, to savor her public embarrassment as compensation for months of subtle slights. But mostly, I felt exhausted, and sad that what should have been a day of pure joy had become another battleground. "What now?" I asked as Lily began to doze in her seat. James reached for my hand. "Now we go home. We put our daughter down for her nap, and then we start setting some boundaries that should have been in place a long time ago." "Do you think they'll ever truly accept us? Accept her?" He was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the road. "I don't know, but that's on them, not on us, and not on Lily. She deserves to grow up knowing she's perfect exactly as she is, not feeling like she has to earn anyone's approval." I gazed at her, our sleeping daughter, her dark lashes resting against her cheeks, her tiny hands curled into fists. In that moment, watching her breathe, I felt something shift inside me. A burden lifting, a clarity emerging. James was right. We'd been allowing others to define our family, to set the terms of our belonging. No more. By the time we reached our home, a modest colonial we'd purchased against Victoria's advice. Wellingtons belong in estates, not starter homes. My phone was buzzing with messages. My mother concerned. Catherine, apologetic. Victoria, demanding. To know if we were coming to the reception. I silenced it and helped James carry our sleeping daughter inside. We placed her in her crib, both of us pausing to watch the rise and fall of her chest, the perfect piece of her expression. Without speaking, we moved to the kitchen. I put on the kettle while James leaned against the counter, loosening his tie. "I need to tell you something," he said finally. My stomach clenched with instinctive fear. "What is it?" "I've been offered a position at a hospital in Portland, Oregon, not Maine. It's a research opportunity I've been interested in for a while, but I didn't pursue it because I knew how far it would take us from my family." He met my gaze steadily. "I think we should consider it." The kettle whistled, a shrill counterpoint to the silence that followed his words. As I processed what he was saying, the magnitude of the change he was suggesting, I felt a strange calm settling over me. "You want to move across the country?" "I want us to be free to be our own family, without the constant weight of expectations and judgments. I want Lily to grow up around people who see her, really see her, for the miracle she is." He ran, a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I'd always found endearing. "But it's not just my decision. It would mean leaving your family too, your practice, your friends." I poured hot water into mugs, buying time to organize my thoughts. The idea was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. A fresh start, a clean break, a chance to define ourselves on our own terms. "My parents would miss us," I said slowly. "Miss Lily growing up, but they could visit. And unlike your family, they've never made me feel like I need to apologize for existing." I added honey to my tea, stirring thoughtfully. "My practice has branches in other cities. I could request a transfer." James watched me carefully, not pushing, giving me space to think. It was one of the things I loved most about him, his patience, his respect for my process. "When would we need to decide?" I asked finally. "Soon, within a couple of weeks." He came to stand beside me, close but not touching. "I know it's a lot to consider, especially after today. We don't have to decide anything right now." I took a sip of my tea, letting the warmth spread through me. Outside our kitchen window, spring was in full bloom, the cherry tree we'd planted. When I first got pregnant, now covered in delicate pink blossoms. New life, new beginnings. "I think we should go," I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. Not because we're running away, but because we're running towards something better, for all of us. James's relief was visible, his shoulders dropping as tension fled. "You're sure?" "No," I laughed softly. "I'm terrified. But sometimes the scariest choices are the right ones." He pulled me into his arms then, his heartbeat steady against my ear. We stood like that for a long moment, silent, together. Partners, parents, a family of our own making. A soft cry from the baby monitor broke the spell. "I'll get her," James said, pressing a kiss to my forehead. As he went to our daughter, I pulled out my phone and finally looked at the messages that had been accumulating. I scrolled past Victoria's demands and Catherine's awkward apologies until I found my mother's text. "Are you okay, sweetheart? Whatever you need, we're here." I typed back quickly, "We're okay. Better than okay. Can you and Dad come for dinner tomorrow? We have some news to share." Then I set the phone aside and went to join my husband and daughter. As I watched James gently changing Lily, talking to her in the soft, silly voice he reserved just for her, I felt the last pieces of doubt falling away. This was my family, complete, perfect, and unbreakable. Lily looked up as I entered the nursery, her face breaking into a gummy smile that made my heart swell. She reached for me, and as I took her from James, her tiny fingers curled around mine with surprising strength. Holding her close, breathing in her sweet baby smell, I silently promised her something. No one would ever again make her feel like she had to justify her place in this world. Not while I had breath in my body. The christening wasn't what I'd imagined. There was no perfect family photo, no warm circle of love surrounding our child. But in its own way, it had given us something more valuable: the courage to break free, to choose our own path. To realize that family isn't defined by matching features or shared DNA or ancient traditions, but by the people who stand beside you when it matters most. As the afternoon sun streamed through the nursery window, painting golden light across my daughter's face, I knew with absolute certainty that James had been right. We deserved better. And now, finally, we were going to find it. The days following the christening passed in a blur of activity. James and I threw ourselves into researching our potential new life in Portland: housing markets, pediatricians, neighborhoods with good schools. It felt surreal and exhilarating, like opening a door we hadn't realized was there all along. Each evening after Lily was asleep, we'd spread maps and printouts across our dining table, building a future that was entirely our own. Victoria called 8 times that first day. I let each call go to voicemail, not yet ready to hear whatever justification or minimization she might offer. On the 9th call, James finally answered, his voice calm but resolute as he told his mother we needed space. I could hear her protests through the phone, something about family obligations and misunderstandings. "The reception is waiting," she insisted. "People have traveled from all over. You're embarrassing the family." "No, Mom," James replied quietly. "What's embarrassing is treating my wife and daughter like they're somehow less worthy because they don't fit your narrow definition of what a Wellington should be." There was a lengthy silence, then Victoria's voice, smaller somehow. "Is this about what Beatrice said? You know how she is, no filter at her age. Nobody takes her seriously." James caught my eye across the room, his expression a mixture of sadness and determination. "It's not just about today. It's about every day since I told you I was marrying Emma. It's about the way you've treated Lily like she's somehow deficient because she doesn't have the Wellington look. And it's about the fact that not once have you stood up for them. Not once have you made them feel truly welcome." "That's not fair," Victoria protested, but there was a note of uncertainty in her voice now. "We're not coming to the reception," James said firmly, "and until you're ready to offer a genuine apology and make real changes, we won't be attending any family functions." He ended the call before she could respond, his hands shaking slightly as he set down the phone. I crossed the room and rapped, my arms around him, feeling the tension in his shoulders, the controlled rhythm of his breathing. "Are you okay?" I asked. He nodded against my hair. "Better than I've been in a long time, actually. I should have done that years ago." The next day, my parents came for dinner as planned. They arrived bearing flowers and a stuffed elephant for Lily, their faces a mixture of concern and confusion after the abrupt end to the christening. We fed them my grandmother's lasagna recipe and waited until they were settled with coffee before sharing our news. "Portland," my mother repeated, her fork pausing halfway to her mouth. "Oregon? But that's so far." My father, always the practical one, immediately began asking about James's new position, the hospital's reputation, the cost of living on the West Coast. Beneath his questions, I could sense his worry, the fear of having his only grandchild grow up thousands of miles away. It's a wonderful opportunity," James explained, describing the research program he'd be joining, the advancements they were making in pediatric cardiology. and it feels like the right time for a fresh start." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "This is because of what happened at the church, isn't it? Because of what that terrible old woman said." I reached across the table to take her hand. "It's because of a lot of things, Mom. The christening was just the final straw." "We'll come visit," my father said firmly, looking at my mother. "Often, and you'll come back for holidays. We'll make it work." My mother nodded, wiping her eyes. "As long as you're happy. That's all we've ever wanted for you, sweetheart." She looked at James with genuine affection. "All of you." Later, as they were leaving, my mother held Lily close, whispering something in her ear that made the baby gurgle with delight. My father clapped James on the shoulder, a gesture that conveyed more than words could have. There was sadness in their goodbye, but no guilt, no manipulation, just love, imperfect but unconditional. "That," James said as we watched their car disappear down our street, "is what family should feel like." The next week passed in a whirlwind of logistics. James accepted the Portland position officially. I requested a transfer to my company's Pacific Northwest division. We contacted a realtor to list our house and began the daunting task of deciding what to keep, what to sell, what to give away. Through it all, there was a lightness between us, a sense of rightness that made even the most tedious tasks feel like steps toward freedom. Victoria attempted reconciliation in her own way. A massive floral arrangement arrived at our door 3 days after the christening, accompanied by a card that read, "Family disagreements happen. Let's move forward." No apology, no acknowledgement of what had actually transpired. I placed the flowers on our front porch for the neighbors to enjoy. Catherine was more direct. She showed up unannounced one afternoon while James was at work, catching me in the middle of packing up the kitchen. "Can we talk?" she asked, hovering awkwardly in the doorway. She looked different somehow, smaller, less self-assured without the backdrop of Wellington family gatherings. I gestured toward the living room, where Lily was napping in her portable crib. "As long as we're quiet." We sat on opposite ends of the sofa, the distance between us filled with unpacked memories and unspoken words. Catherine fidgeted with her wedding ring, a massive diamond that seemed to weigh down her slender finger. "I want to apologize," she said finally, the words coming out in a rush. "For the christening. For not speaking up when Aunt Beatrice said what she said. For a lot of things, actually." I studied her face, looking for the calculation I was accustomed to seeing there, the careful positioning that characterized most Wellington interactions. Instead, I found genuine remorse. "Why didn't you?" I asked simply. "Speak up, I mean." She gave a small, humorless laugh. "Because that's not what we do in our family. We don't challenge the hierarchy. We don't make waves." She glanced toward the sleeping baby. "But James did. And watching him stand up for you and Lily, it made me realize how much courage I've been lacking." "It wasn't easy for him either," I said quietly. "He loves your family, despite everything." "I know." She was silent for a moment. Then, "He told Mother about Portland." I nodded, unsurprised that the news had traveled. It's a good opportunity for him professionally. And personally, I imagine. There was no judgment in her tone, just understanding. "Mother's taking it hard. She keeps saying he'll come to his senses eventually." "He's made his decision," I said, perhaps more sharply than I intended. "We both have." Catherine leaned forward slightly. "I know, and I don't blame you. I'm going to miss him. Miss you both. Miss getting to know my niece." She glanced at Lily again, her expression softening. "She really is beautiful, Emma. Perfect just as she is." The words, so simple and yet so profound after months of subtle undermining, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Thank you for saying that. I should have said it sooner. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small, flat package wrapped in tissue paper. This is for Lily, a going-away present, I guess. I unwrapped it carefully to find a delicate silver frame. Inside was a photograph I didn't recognize, a black and white image of a woman holding a baby, both of them laughing into the camera. The woman's dark hair and eyes were startlingly familiar. That's our great-grandmother, Catherine explained, Sophia Acosta, before she married into the Wellington family and became Sophia Wellington. Mother never displays this photo because it doesn't fit the Wellington narrative, but Sophia was the daughter of Spanish immigrants. Everyone always said James looked more like her side than our father's. I stared at the photo, taking in the woman's warm smile, the undeniable resemblance to my husband, to my daughter. I never knew. No one talks about it. Just like no one mentions our cousin Michael's Japanese wife, or the fact that father's sister married a black man in the 70s. The Wellingtons have been selectively editing their family history for generations. She stood, smoothing her skirt with nervous hands. I just thought Lily should have a piece of her heritage, all of her heritage. After she left, I sat for a long time, holding the photograph. When Lily woke from her nap, I showed it to her, tracing my finger over the face of her great-great-grandmother. Look, sweetheart, you come from a long line of beautiful, strong women, no matter what anyone says. That night, I placed the photo on our mantel, where the evening light caught the silver of the frame, making it gleam like a beacon. The morning we left for Portland dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect spring day that seemed designed for new beginnings. The moving truck had taken most of our belongings the day before, leaving just our suitcases and Lily's essential supplies for the journey. As James loaded the car, I took one last walk through our first home, running my fingers along familiar walls, saying goodbye to the place where we had become a family. My parents came to see us off, my mother holding Lily until the last possible moment, my father helping James double-check the car's preparation for the cross-country drive. There were tears, of course, but also excitement, their parting words full of plans for visits and video calls. As we pulled away from the curb, I was surprised to see another car parked just down the street. A sleek black sedan I recognized immediately as Victoria's. She sat behind the wheel, watching us, making no move to approach. When our eyes met through the windshield, she raised one hand in a gesture that might have been a wave, might have been a farewell. I didn't wave back. She came, James said, quietly, having spotted his mother as well. But she didn't get out of the car, I noted, didn't try to talk to us. He nodded, his expression thoughtful rather than angry. Baby steps, I guess. Do you regret any of this? I asked as our neighborhood receded in the rearview mirror. Leaving? Standing up to them? All of it? James reached over to take my hand, his touch warm and steady. Only that I didn't do it sooner. For you. For us. In the back seat, Lily babbled happily, oblivious to the significance of our departure. I turned to watch her playing with the stuffed elephant my parents had given her, her face alight with the simple joy of the moment. She caught me looking and gave me a gummy smile that made my heart expand. 3,000 miles lay ahead of us. A new city, new home, new community waiting to be discovered. There would be challenges, of course, moments of doubt, times when we'd question whether we'd made the right choice. But as we merged onto the highway, heading west toward our future, I felt nothing but certainty, because I knew now what I hadn't fully understood before the christening. Family isn't about matching features or shared bloodlines or ancient traditions. It's about who stands beside you when the world tries to tell you that you don't belong. It's about creating a space where love doesn't come with conditions, where acceptance isn't something you have to earn. As the miles began to accumulate beneath our wheels, I made a silent promise to my daughter. She would grow up knowing her worth wasn't tied to anyone else's approval. she would understand that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from what hurts you, even when it comes disguised as privilege or tradition or family. And she would always know that she was perfect, exactly as she was. Portland was waiting, and so was the rest of our story, one that we would write ourselves, on our own terms, free from shadows that had never been ours to begin with. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.